Now, back to
Will and Dibby
on 95.7 The Game.
No Mark Willard this week. He'll be back in on Monday. It's Dan Dibley, Mark Grandi with you here on Willard and Dibs on 95.7 The Game. Getting into some Niners training camp. Brock Purdy's interceptions. Worrisome to you? 888-957-9570. We'll get back to that in a second, but I feel like I'm being coached up during the break, Dibs. If I won't spoil it, the match is still ongoing at the moment, but we got a little bit of beach volleyball at the Olympics. USA versus Canada. A fun match at the moment, but of course, your expertise in the sport of volleyball, you're telling me what's going through these players' minds right now in the middle of this match.
It's pretty exciting, and spoiler alert, LeBron James is actually there.
Oh, no, how could you spoil that?
I know. It's midnight, 12:04 Paris time, and LeBron and his entourage among the only people who are actually there.
It is empty.
Yeah.
It's a shame because it's a great match.
It's a shame, third set, and I do appreciate the fact that a lot of these matches, games, events are stacked up until midnight so that we can at least watch them live here outside of prime time. I know it's 6 o'clock on the East Coast, but it's an afternoon delight here for us to be able to watch this. So it's fun. I've been trying to get in on the Olympics, but a lot of the stuff happens in the middle of the night, and you can't fully watch it. But I am locked in on tomorrow, the first round of the women's 100-meter, Sha'Carri Richardson in the first round, which is mostly nothing.
She'll dominate the first round.
Just make it through, just advance, and then you get to the semis from there, and then the final. So I believe the track and field starts either today or tomorrow with some field events, and so usually the second half of the Olympics is when the track and field, the athletics they call it, those events get underway.
Tracks, I think, is probably my favorite event at the Summer Olympics to watch. Watch those athletes. I mean, there's so many fun events. I love the hurdles, 110-meter hurdles, 400 hurdles. A lot of really good ones. I'm not as big into the long distance running, but those shorter, quicker ones and seeing those sprinters is just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I think we just had the marathon yesterday. The women's marathon, I think, was yesterday.
I did not see that.
Yeah, I thought I saw some road running with a clock about an hour and 48 minutes, and I thought, it's got to be the marathon.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Anyway,
or Katie Ledecky swimming for like 20 straight minutes or whatever that is.
Yeah, in the 1500. Yeah, which is the metric mile, and she has the 20 fastest times in history. When you think about just pure dominance, whatever the team, whatever the sport, like Boston Celtics in the 60s when they won 11 of 12 or whatever, Katie Ledecky literally has the top 20 times all time.
And she's so far ahead of everybody. I mean, that stat puts it out. But if you're watching her, she's like lapping the field in an event like that. She's finishing on one end of the pool. Everybody else is out of the picture going the other way.
Right. So you're swimming for silver, basically.
Exactly.
When you're in the pool with Katie Ledecky.
And you're swimming for like maybe the 30th fastest time ever because you're not catching her.
Right. If you PR, maybe you can make it in the top 30 all time, but the top 20 are all Katie. So.
Oh, God. Incredible. Incredible athletic feats going on in Paris right now. I'm not going to spoil anything else, but watch Prime Time at the Olympics to get caught up later on tonight. All right, back to the 49ers. 888-957-9570. Neither Dibs nor I are that worried by Brock Purdy's interceptions. I think he's thrown like 7 through 7 days of 7 practice days, but I think the vast majority of those have come the last couple of days. And of course, the first couple of days, you're not really like going against live defense. So you can take out really a couple of those days, but a lot of interceptions lately. I don't think it's, freak out. It's a major red flag. The Niners got to rethink their quarterback position. Nothing that crazy. But there are some people out there, Dibs, who are a little bit worried. And if you are worried or if you're not, explain why. Give us a call. 888-957-9570. You can also hit us up on the Xfinity mobile text line, 888-957-9570. And we will ask Larry Krueger about this coming up in just a little bit. Larry will be on at 4. So in an hour, we'll chat with Larry on the River Islands guest line about this and a number of other things. I think one thing that is interesting to point out, Dibs, as it goes with the impending Brock Purdy contract extension that the Niners have been considering, not considering, but they've known that they've been going to have to do at some point when the time does come after this season. There's a lot of us out here And I think it's relatively logical to think, all right, well, when Brock Purdy gets that major contract extension, maybe it's $55 million, maybe it's $60 million a year, whatever it is, that's the moment where it's going to be difficult for the Niners to keep all this other great talent around. And also some of it is, I mean, you're getting up there in age with some of these guys. Trent Williams, who knows how many years he has left. George Kittle, certainly still very good, but on the back end of his peak at the very least. What happens when the 49ers Dibs are led by Brock Purdy without all this all-pro talent around him? And there are some out there who think, well, this training camp is a perfect example of that because there's no Trent Williams. There's no Brandon Ayuk. You don't have George Kittle in there every single play. And Brock Purdy, suddenly throwing all these interceptions. Is this a look into the Niners and Brock Purdy's future without that all-pro talent once they have so much money tied up with Brock Purdy?
I don't think that this is a fair measurement for what the future will hold because of what I was explaining before about, how you approach training camp as a quarterback. You're going to make throws that you don't normally make, and you're going to have defensive players who are breaking on the ball, and you're going to have offensive players who maybe aren't your number ones. And the big thing, and I believe this was mentioned before, when you are in offense, you're not game planning your offense for what the defense is going to be most vulnerable to. Right now, you are just running your plays. So offensively, you've got 20 plays in a session that you're going to run, and you're just going to run it. And, Brock Purdy may get 8 or 9 or 10 of those plays, and then you're going to get your second quarterback and your third quarterback, and they'll get a few plays. Whatever the number of plays is, you're just going to run them. And these are the plays we're going to run no matter what the defense is putting out. And so the defense is doing the same thing. We're going to run this defense, this coverage, this front, whatever we're going to run, we're going to work on what we work on, and the offense is going to work on what they work on. So you might break the huddle, and you might get to the line of scrimmage and see a defense that is, Schmidt, this is not going to work out. But you're not going to audible. You're not going to change up your play. You're not going to scheme for what the defense is vulnerable against. And so it might just be a bad matchup. It's like the old card game War. I don't know if you played a lot of War growing up.
Yeah.
War is the most mindless yet fun game.
Which is why I played so much of it as a kid.
And I played it with my kids. And as a kid, I would actually play by myself because my siblings were older. And a lot of times I would just play right stack against left stack. And you turn the card over. And in training camp, it's kind of like the game of War where you break the huddle and you might have an 8 and you pull your 8 and the defense has a 9. Well, you lose. And the worst part about War was when you'd throw a king and then your brother or sister would throw the ace. It'd be like, oh, crap. Not only did I lose, but now you get my king. Yeah. And the other one was when, I don't know if you played this way, where you pull a 7, I pull a 7. Yep. Now we have a war. It's 3 cards down. And then the 4th card comes up, and then whatever. We have an 8, each 8 card down, and then I pull a jack, and then you pull a 10,
and I flip my 3, and I gave you an ace, a king, and a jack, or whatever it is.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
and then the game's over. And I'm like, well, had to pack it up.
Just before back to football, we also played in our house with we had a rule called 2 cards. When you had 2 cards left, you got to pull both cards up. And then only when you had 2 cards left, you got to make a decision on what you would play. So if you're the big
make the
stack,
smart decision. If you can win with your lower card, play the lower card.
So I have 2 cards and you throw a 4 and I've got a 5 and a king. Well, I'm going to throw my 5 and take your 4, and then I'm left with my king, and then whatever happens. But that's just a little bit of a Dibley family nuance.
Just
to the game of War.
Add a little quick aside to your little quick aside.
I love it.
What's the most number of times that you get the same cards where you flip the same card and you go 3 down and then you flip again? You keep getting the same card on that third flip?
Yeah, overtimes.
How many in a row where that stack just keeps growing?
I think I got 3. Triple overtime.
I think 3 for me too.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever gotten 4.
I mean, that gets crazy because then
it's like half the deck right there.
Exactly. And that's where you talk about it being game over.
It all changes on this one card.
That's right.
The whole game.
And then I throw 3 and you have a 2, and it's like the biggest exalting win in history because I got 12 of your cards.
I'm just thinking back to so many like family trips and vacations playing War with my sisters growing up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Good time killer. Yeah. But I do think that training camp is a little bit like War where
I forgot even how. Yeah, explain this to me again. I don't even know how it relates anymore.
I'm going to run my play. So whatever, I have my 16 cards in my stack, and I'm just just going to play my cards in a row. And I'm not going to worry about strategy. I'm not looking at my cards, and I'm not thinking about what you have. It's just, this is what I'm running. And the defense, this is what we're running. And so I do think that Brock Purdy gets into a spot where, it's not an ideal play. It's not a play call that Captain Laminated Play Sheet would have designed against a defense. It's more vulnerable to this, or maybe we can do that, or we're going to scheme this up. And my first 15 plays, based on what their defensive tendencies are, we're just running our plays. We want to practice these plays. We want to run these plays and see how they do. So sometimes when you do that against a defense, you're going to lose. And your quarterback is going to take a chance because it's practice, and he's not worried about his stats. So I do think that sometimes practice stats get blown out of proportion based on the circumstance of what they're trying to do.
888-957-9570. Purdy's training camp interceptions, troublesome for you or no? Are we overreacting to something that, as Dibs is talking about, isn't really all that deep? You're just trying to get used to the speed of football, the physicality of football, and this isn't really game plan laden football at this stage. Let's go out to the phones. 888-957-9570. Up next is Mike in San Jose. Mike, what's up? You're on with Dibs and Grandi on Willard and Dibs. What do you think, Mike?
So I'm obviously you don't like to hear your quarterbacks throwing interceptions, okay? But the thing is he's going to do risky things because he's in practice. There's nothing to lose. He's going to try to fit balls in tight windows. He's going to try to hit back shoulder throws when they ain't there. He's going to do those type of things right now, and I don't care about that. I care about the regular season. So all he's got to do is protect the ball. That's fine. But he's got to take some risks at some point, and what a better time to do it than right now in preseason when you got one of the best stacked defenses. Now, I also need to know what kind of interceptions were they. Were they interceptions like a tip ball or something, a deflection? That means something, because if he's just straight missing dudes and other dudes are jumping his routes,
Oh, Mike, sorry about that. We cut you, or you got cut off there at the end. Your phone lost service. But I think we got your point for the most part, Mike. Thanks for the call. 888-957-9570. I think Mike's right. I mean, ultimately, as you laid out, this is about trying and kind of testing your limits and what works and what doesn't work. And you're obviously being way more willing to try and take risks here that you wouldn't otherwise in regular season games. And Purdy has said as much. This is the time to experiment. Mike's also right. The kind of interception matters. We were talking about that a little bit earlier with Jimmy Garoppolo. We weren't necessarily using that to argue whether or not these interceptions in camp matters, but explaining how some of Purdy's interceptions last year weren't as bad as some other interceptions. So I think Mike has good points. And again, it's not that I disagree with you or Mike. Just trying to provide, play a little bit of devil's advocate here, because I think there is a portion of the fan base who still isn't terribly sold that Brock Purdy is going to be able to do what he did last year when you don't have the full complement of weapons that he had last year.
And I get that, but I don't know if that really matters for the next year or 2 years, because even if he signs a contract next offseason, and we all expect that he will, and it's 55, let's call it $60 million, and he gets $60 million for 5 years, he gets a $300 million contract, and 200 of it's guaranteed, and the guarantee at signing is about 145, whatever those numbers are. That doesn't matter until after next year, because the contract won't kick in next year. He might get some money up front in a signing bonus, but you'll still be able to have for the majority of the team to be able to come back. It's not until after that year where you really have to worry. So you got Brock Purdy for this year, and you got Brock Purdy for next year making a relatively small amount of money. And then at that point, Brock Purdy's going to have to probably do more with less, unless you are hitting on these wide receivers. If Ricky Pearsall turns out to be a dude and he's on a rookie deal, and Jacob Cowing, 4th-round pick, if he's a dude and you've got him in the fold, and I don't know what you'll do at running back if McCaffrey's still here and if Trent Williams still around and Debo and Brandon and George, you've got 2 more years to really worry about what else is around him. So I do think that sometimes we skip ahead too far in the future, worrying about things that we can't worry about. For example, me worrying about when I'm going to cash out my Social Security. I'm 55 years old and I've got a 2-year-old. So I'm thinking if I could work 15 more years and I'm 70 and I cash out my Social Security then, what's that number going to be like, and what's that money going to be worth, and can I really make it happen with a 17-year-old and this and that? That is, 2039. Right now we're sitting here on August 1st, 2024. Can I even make it back to my car today? And so I do think that a lot of times we in sports media, we start to skip too far ahead. Right now, the only thing that matters is, can Brock Purdy do what he did last year again? Can they sign Ayuk? Can Trent come in? Can this team stay healthy like they did last year? And can they go on another run? Whatever happens after that with Brock's contract and all the rest of it, that for me is way further down the road.
I really hate that I'm sounding like the Brock Purdy doubter on this show right now, but I think I get everything that you're saying, and that's a problem for in the future if it even becomes a problem, and there's no guarantee that it even becomes a problem. But the reality is the 49ers will very likely give Brock Purdy a very, very, very rich extension after this coming season. And this coming season is going to feature, regardless of the holdouts right now, it's going to feature Trent Williams. It's going to feature Christian McCaffrey. It's going to feature Deebo Samuel. It's going to feature Ayuk and George Kittle. Those players will all be featured this year. And successful, not, you win the Super Bowl or not, you're not going to have the knowledge of knowing what Brock Purdy is like without that group of offensive weapons until after you already signed him to that major contract. And it could turn out to be the easiest decision in the history of the world. And I'm not suggesting the Niners shouldn't sign him to the extension. Of course they should. You're almost damned if you do, sometimes you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If the quarterback is good, you're not damned if you do. But if you don't sign him, you're damned if you don't, because you don't got someone else good enough to come in and fill that hole, generally speaking. But I think there is a little bit of reason to be worried that we don't know maybe everything possible about Brock Purdy, and you're taking a little bit of a leap of faith, hoping that he is good enough to elevate everyone else around him on the roster after you don't have that kind of talent, because you're going to have to make that decision on his extension, presumably before you see him without a number of these guys.
Yes, and I think that that's a fair way to look at it, but if you want to talk about what quarterback in the NFL is able to elevate the talent around him, even though he doesn't have that much talent around him, and you can start with Patrick Mahomes, and then I'll wait for who the next quarterback is who actually is able to do that, because Josh Allen this year is going to be charged with doing that same thing. You let Stephon Diggs walk in Buffalo, and so now Josh Allen's got a mostly unproven core of wide receivers and running backs and tight ends, and so now he's going to have to do that very thing. Cincinnati's got two guys who are highly paid, and your quarterback is making a boatload. And now Tua, you're making a ton, and you've got two wide receivers making more than $20 million a year. So what other quarterback is expected to do what we want Brock Purdy to have to do? And again, this is 2 years down the road. Right now, Brock Purdy making $1 million a year, whatever the number exactly is. It's about $1 million. All he's asked to do is be a very good quarterback with a very good team. And if you do that, and you get paid, and a couple years down the road, if you don't have George and Deebo and Brandon or Trent or Christian, okay, then it's up to Kyle and John to find young players to be around him, much like Green Bay has done. And I do look at the Green Bay model as one that, if I'm Kyle Shanahan, I'm looking at Green Bay and thinking, that's an interesting way to go about it. You let Devontae Adams walk, or you traded him, and you use all your draft capital on wide receivers and tight ends, and now you've got 4 or 5 weapons on rookie deals to go along with your $55 million a year quarterback. So that, to me, is going to be the way this has to go, and I think that they've already started that process.
Yeah. 888-957-9570. Worried at all by Brock Purdy and his training camp interceptions? Maybe it's less about training camp interceptions and just more so how this offense is going to look in the future for the 49ers. 888-957-9570. Up next is Bobby in Los Altos. Bobby, what's up? You're on Willard and Dibs. It's Grandi in for Willard, so Dibs and Grandi with you. Bobby, how you feeling?
I'm doing well, thank you, guys. So first thing, on the war, I believe on the 3 cards, I grew up on the East Coast, but I imagine war is a global game. We would say, I declare, and then you drop that 4th card with the war. You guys didn't really mention that, so maybe that's a regional difference, East Coast versus West Coast. But
no, I'm with you there, and I remember the I declare, and then on the 4th card you would say war, And you would flip that
That's
fourth
right.
card. Yeah. It wasn't mandatory, but for me, it was more of a spiritual, rhythmic kind of a chant tweak to it. But yeah, thank you, Bobby, for bringing that home.
Yes, and then the best is when your last card was maybe a king. You got one card, and then 3 seconds later you have 20 cards, right?
Yep.
That's how it.
It's a great comeback. Yeah.
Yes, but look, first of all, in terms of how I'm doing, I'm not doing as well, and I am jealous of anyone that is worried about what Brock Purdy is doing during preseason, because you must have a really good life if that's your worry. Every season for the past, 5, 6 years, all I think about is the NFC Championship game going to be at Levi's or will it be away? To think about preseason, it's not even a game. Not a game. We're talking about
Practice.
Not even preseason. We're talking about training camp.
Thank you.
We're talking about training camp. And it's, I don't know. I guess just bigger picture, there's no way I would focus on that. I'm worried about the Super Bowl. I'm not worried about what's going on in training camp. Now, that being said, I think the Niners' best chance for the Super Bowl, unfortunately, was last year. This year, the rest of the NFC is only getting better, and we got to go all in and spend whatever we got to spend in order to be competitive for this year. And look, Brock Purdy, it's not like, when he gets potentially the richest contract in NFL history, it's just because he was the next man up. It's really not to say that he's 30% better than someone that signed a contract 2 or 3 years ago. That's just market rates. I'm not quite sure why we're trying to figure out what the value of this guy will be 2 years down the road if he gets $300 million or $200 guaranteed. He was just next in line, and that's just how it is. The salary cap's increasing. It's always going to be like that. I don't really view him as them saying that, he's the best player in the NFL. It's just that he had the next quarterback contract. So I don't really understand why anyone would worry about that. That's just the way it works. Tua, is he, a top 5 quarterback? Probably not, but his contract was due, and so he got a big payday. The same thing with the Jacksonville guy, So I guess I just can't worry about salary cap and implications. All I can worry about is what are they going to do this year? And if they break the bank 2 years down the road, I don't care. I need to figure out how to get a Super Bowl in this window, which I think expired, unfortunately, probably last year, and this is the last chance.
Yeah, Bobby, I don't think it expired, but
I wonder why Bobby thought that. And thanks for the call, Bobby. For me, the Super Bowl window is still intact.
Last year might have been the best chance, but it's not like this year's a bad chance.
Exactly. And last year was the best chance because you were healthy. And if you look at the injuries from Brock, Christian, Trent, Debo, George, and Brandon, they were almost non-existent. And so that was the key.
Other than that 3-game stretch in the middle of the year where you missed Trent and Debo and you lost all those games.
That's fine. And I do think you were going to lose to Cincinnati anyway. And I mentioned it at the start of the year. That was a scheduled loss.
Score one for the Dibber.
And they were coming off of a bye, and you were at the end of 8 straight games going into your bye. That was going to be a tough game. And we could look at this year's schedule, and I could pinpoint the game or two that they're most likely to lose, even though they're favored in all 17. To go 17-0 is incredibly difficult, and it's actually only been done once. And actually, they went 16-0, the Patriots. They didn't even go 17-0.
True.
So it's never happened. So it's difficult, but I do think that the only reason why their window was more open last year than this year was because of health.
All right. Join 95.7 The Game at Harding Park Friday, September 6th for the Pettinelli Financial Partners Golf Tournament benefiting the Autism Society San Francisco Bay Area. Go to 957thegame.com to learn more. Presented by Atco Pest Control, the Bay Area's locally family-owned pest control company. It's Dibs and Grandi with you in for Willard on Willard and Dibs. More coming up on the other side. Plus Brock Purdy commenting on his contract in the future. We can get into that. We'll hear from Brock and more coming up next. 888-9